Welcome back to the Mission43 Podcast, the podcast of learned doctors. Today, we have Dr. H-Lo, the one and only Heather Lopez. She's a doctor of physical therapy. She's the director of Challenge Athletes Foundation of Idaho. She's a former Mission43 Leaders Fellow, and she's an Army veteran. So let's do this. Welcome to the Mission43 Podcast, a podcast dedicated to discussing the struggles and triumphs of transitioning to life after the military. I'm Dan Nelson. I'm a former Army Special Forces officer who's personally experienced the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. In every episode, we'll be sharing tips, strategies, and real-life stories of veterans and their families who've chosen Idaho for their life after the military. So join us, and let's start the conversation. Welcome, Heather Lopez. Do you mind if I call you H-Lo?
That's fine.
Dr. Heather Lopez, Doctor of Physical Therapy. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're the director of Challenge Athletes Foundation Idaho, which is called CAF Idaho. We no longer say CAF Idaho. It's CAF, the Challenge Athletes Foundation of Idaho.
Correct.
You're an Army veteran. You got out as a captain, right?
I did. Mm-hmm.
And like I said, you're already a learned doctor, and you grace us every day and at work in the Idaho Outdoor Fieldhouse, the home of your organization and mine.
I do, yeah.
So where are you from?
So I grew up in Michigan, Quincy, Michigan.
Quincy, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
The large metropolis?
It is a very small kind of farm town, one stoplight. So
when were you interested in medicine with this one stoplight town? Were there a lot of doctors and especially women? Were there a lot of women going in that direction in your town? Like what started you in that way?
So no, I really wasn't interested in medicine or healthcare growing up. And kind of interestingly, like you talk about women being in those roles. So there really weren't a lot. And I think I ended up choosing healthcare because my mom, when I was a kid, I remember her saying, "Oh, you should be a PT." And like healthcare was kind of this female-oriented role. And
in your family or in general?
Just in general.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, I remember her saying like, well, you can have a family, you can take time off, you can adjust your schedule. And so I ended up just kind of like taking that route after multiple like major changes in college. Yeah, but I don't know that I really wanted to do that as a kid. I excelled in math and science. I wanted to be an architect.
Nerd.
Yeah, or fly airplanes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I didn't really think that those were female roles growing up.
That's interesting. Well, it's weird. My guidance counselor all the time always suggested garbage man and or cop. I don't know why that was a thing, but those two things
Fits. Yeah, checks
yeah,
out.
Yeah, I mean, to each their own, but that was mine. So where did you go to college then?
I went to Michigan State.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Go
green.
Spartans or whatever. Spartans?
Go green. And then you say
go green.
Go white.
Go white.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, all is forgiven. No big deal. But then you took a turn, right? Like, were you in college or were you out of college when you decided to join the Big Green as far as the Army?
So I was in college. So in school, I had kind of changed my major a few times and ended up kind of going back to that, what I heard was as a kid, and going back to PT. And I liked exercise science and all of those things. You're a super
athletic person.
So yeah, and I played lots of sports and all of that. So kind of decided to go down the PT route. And one of my really good friends in college, she was in the Army. Well, she wasn't in the Army currently, but she was in the Army and then had used her GI Bill to go back to school.
Oh, yeah.
And so she said she was also going to go for PT. And she said, have you thought about the Army? They have a PT program. And I was like, no, I've never really thought of that, but looked into it. Really good school, associated with Baylor University, ranked in the top 5. And then I kind of thought about like just like who I wanted to serve and as a PT and kind of what I thought I wanted to do and what I thought that would be like in the Army and having that sort of adventure piece to it that I desired in a career. And
I'm curious, what did you think that a PT in the Army did? Or what was your idea of that?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people think this going into PT in the Army or like the sports world is like you'll have this, and it's true, like younger population that you'll work with, more athletic, perhaps.
Allegedly.
Not always the case, but
Yep.
I guess it depends on where you are. And I thought, and I was right about this, is that there would be opportunity for other things. I mean, when you're in the Army, you're a soldier first. And so you still have to do all of those things. And that appealed to me.
So you did that. You made that decision in college. Then you went through actual PT school, like in the Army, like through Baylor at Fort Sam Houston, or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I actually didn't get into the Army Baylor PT program the first time I applied.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
the dirty secrets are coming out.
Yeah. Which ended up being a huge blessing, to be very honest. I was devastated, and I was like, that's what I really wanted to do. And I think it made me think, like, do I really want to do this?
That's a good thing to think about as a young person.
And so I started PT school at Grand Valley State University.
Oh, really?
And I went for a semester. And in that semester, I reapplied to the Army program. Mm-hmm. And I ended up getting in the second time around. So after that semester, I stopped PT school there, and then kind of waited it out and then went the following summer.
So that's something that's a common theme as far as knowing you for probably, 4 or 5 years now. Personally knowing you, persistence is definitely a common theme throughout all of this. You're a very persistent person.
Yeah, I think so. And not that was necessarily a failure, but it's one of those things where, I had set a goal and I wanted to do that, and that's where I wanted to be, and felt like if I, tried again and put my best foot forward, that it could be an opportunity. And I feel like, that's kind of how I do things.
Well, yeah, not everyone gets invited to the prom on the first try, right?
That's true.
Speaking from experience, at least, or at all. Either way. But, besides psychological issues of mine, talking about you and your life, so you're a young, what did you commission as? A second lieutenant or a captain, or how does that work?
Second lieutenant.
Okay, so you started from the bottom. Now you're here. But so second Lieutenant Lopez then down there, and you're going through PT school in the Army. Is that a different experience than most PT students have? I honestly don't know. Like, going through Army PT school, is that much different than PT school?
Yeah, so I do know because I've gone to 2 different programs.
Yeah.
So yes, it was different in the fact, it's still PT school. Like, you're learning all of the things, you're doing all of that. I think in the Army, it was heavily orthopedic focused, heavily manual therapy focused, because they're training PTs to be PTs in the Army and what you're going to deal with once you get out of school.
Get the machine back and running and back to the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, and it's faster. So, now there are programs that are pretty quick. There's hybrid programs that are 27 months and things like that. But the Army program, you are going to school. That's your job, right, as a second lieutenant. So you're going to school, you're in classroom 8 to 5 every day. And we finished in 27 months, which most PT programs are about 3 years long.
And you finished with a doctorate in PT at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So in 27 months, you go from bachelor's degree to doctor.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So then what did you do in the Army? Because my Army experience as a second lieutenant and first lieutenant was very different than yours, obviously. Like, what was your first assignment? Like, where do you go? Or do you just get lauded and put on a pedestal? And
yeah, that's how it works in
the golden calf,
the medical field in the Army.
They actually plate you in golden armor and then just set you on top of things?
Mm-hmm, and then people worship you. It's so
perfect.
Weird.
That's off-putting at first, but I could get used to it.
No. So as a second lieutenant, I was in school. I was at Fort Sam Houston, going to school every day. After so many months, then I was still in school, promoted to a first lieutenant. And then from there, I went as a first lieutenant, and then you go to your first assignment, and it's needs of the Army is where you go. And I went to Fort Campbell. It's not really where I wanted to go.
The jewel of Kentucky / Tennessee.
But I ended up loving it there.
Yeah.
So I started out working in the hospital at Fort Campbell, treating patients, active duty retirees, dependents in the hospital. I was there for about a year, and then I transitioned. So the Army moved to a physical therapist with every brigade combat team. So I think
one physical therapist
for every brigade combat team.
Around 3,100 people in a BCT at that time?
Yeah, probably a little more than that. Probably close to 4,000.
Okay. Oh, no big deal.
So yeah, I think I might have been, and you can fact check me, but I think I might have been the 1st Brigade PT that was at the 101st. So I was with 2nd Brigade. And
we will fact check you.
Yeah, please.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we actually don't know how to do that here, so you can say whatever you want. We're like, okay.
Okay.
We don't own a computer.
Good to know.
Sorry.
Good to know.
So 2nd BCT in the 101st Airborne.
Yeah, so I was there, and basically kind of was a figure it out sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like figure out how to be a brigade PT. And so I set up a clinic in the brigade gym. I kind of had a little closet and somehow figured out how to run internet to it, so I could document, because that's very important in the PT world. So I set up a little clinic in the gym. I saw patients there, and then I saw patients like at the little treatment facility as well, the medical treatment facility. But I would just see from my brigade there.
Yeah. So you had to make a closet, HIPAA compliant and all that stuff. Cool.
Yeah. So I did that. I did some injury for prevention, reduction sort of stuff with the brigade, which was great. That was kind of just first being introduced. Now the Army has gone to the H2F model, which is kind of like, that was the grassroots sort of effort there.
The OG of bringing practical medicine to infantry brigades, for instance.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So did that, and then I deployed with them, came back, and then promoted maybe when I came back, or somewhere in there, went to the career course back down to Fort Sam Houston, and then I went to 7th Group, and 7th Group had just moved to Florida at the time.
How'd you get selected for that? I mean,
so it was an application process to
okay.
be a group PT, and so I put my application in and was selected to do that for that group. And as they were moving down, I met them down there after the career course.
Their big move from Bragg to Eglin, the promised land down there. So you were in the Redneck Riviera and the Florida Panhandle then, right?
I was, Lower Alabama.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Well, what was that experience like after being, immersed in the Campbell 101st type thing? Was it a different feel when you got to 7th Group?
Yeah, it's similar and different. So, I mean, there's like the operators, which is kind of, I think, a different caliber maybe than like the typical infantryman in the...
Certainly different than Navy SEALs.
101st. Yeah, right? Are there any Navy SEALs?
Yeah, exactly. Way different.
And gone a lot, so in and out. So treatment is really hard with that kind of thing. But I was the PT for the entire group, so it wasn't just...
Oh, so that hadn't changed either.
Correct. So it's thousands of people. So you're treating everyone that's attached as part of 7th Group. But it was similar in terms of, I still like set up a clinic in their gym. It was a new facility. The gym was nicer. It was bigger, like, those kind of things. Deployed with them. So, I mean, the experience itself was similar. We just kind of had more resources there. That was when the Thor 3 program was starting. And so we had hired strength coaches. We hired a dietitian, kind of all the things that the regular Army is now.
Now, during this whole period where you're going through all this training and, junior officer career, which is different too, because you're also the sole medical professional, or at least the sole DPT, Doctor of Physical Therapy, in an entire Special Forces group, let's say. That's a different experience than most junior officers, I would say. But were you always like a physical badass yourself? Because you're an athlete. Like, you do all the stuff now, still mountain biking, trail running, all those things, all the workouts at the field house. You're crushing all that stuff, and you always have. Was that a big part of your life at that point too?
Yeah, I mean, I've been an athlete forever. I mean, both my parents were college athletes.
Oh, I didn't know that. What sports?
Grew up. My dad played baseball. My mom played basketball. Yeah, so we grew up like, that's what we did. Like, we went out to the track. We went to the gym and played basketball. We played baseball games in our yard. So just kind of grew up doing that.
Did your parents ever teach you what type of negative effect that would make on the self-esteem of your coworkers?
No.
No? Okay. Good. Just making sure.
No,
but
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, well, it can be. I'm not just saying. So you had these experiences. You went to Afghanistan with 7th Group at least once, right?
Once, yep.
And then what was the decision like for you to get out and enter the civilian realm?
Yeah, so I was at like the almost halfway mark. And so I felt like I had to make a decision, as most people do. Am I going to stay in and make this a career, or am I going to get out and kind of do the civilian life? And at that point, I was getting ready to probably leave 7th Group, and I liked that job.
Yeah.
I liked the brigade PT job. And from there, you go on to jobs that are not as desirable. You know, you may run a hospital clinic, or
the S word, the staff jobs.
Yeah, all the staff jobs. And so that wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I decided to get out. Can
we talk real cash money? Like, what was the difference? I'm guessing you could have made a lot more money on the civilian side than you would as an Army PT, or?
Not necessarily.
Oh,
no.
Okay. So that wasn't like a big decision factor either?
No, the dollars didn't really make that much of a difference.
So you decided to get out and throw your hat into the civilian arena. How was the transition experience for you? Because you have, unlike most people in the military, you have a job that directly translates to the exact same thing, essentially, in the civilian world.
Yeah, so you'd think it would be easy to...
I do think it's easy. Tell me why it is.
Yeah, to be able to go from a job... Yeah, I mean, it's the same title, essentially.
Yeah.
You can put together a resume, and it's got the same skills on it and education. However, I mean, I got a job. You know, like, it wasn't hard to leave the Army and get a job, but...
Bragging about it. Jeez.
I didn't... That's not where I wanted to be. Like, it wasn't, it didn't have the same feel, being...
When you say that, like, why? Because you're still doing PT. I'm guessing PT is PT.
Yeah, it is. You know, in the Army, I felt like, you know, you're part of something. You're part of a team. You're part of something bigger. There is that kind of camaraderie there when you're in a clinic, like working in your sort of space that you have. You don't get that. The autonomy that you have in the Army as a PT is much greater.
What?
Than on the civilian side.
Wow.
So, like, you can order some medications as a PT in the Army. You can order imaging. I was like the first level orthopedic provider, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, where in the civilian sector it's not like that. And on the civilian side, your days are pretty much the same, like every single day. And in the Army, you're still seeing patients, but there's differences in your day. I was doing different things. You're still doing the Army things that you need to do. So yeah, I didn't love it being out of the Army, and I thought it would be the same. You know, I thought it would be easy.
Well, obviously so did I. as far as being a doctor of anything, a doctor of physical therapy would translate fairly easily. But you also said that like the people you treated in the Army were generally younger, right? Like, I mean, most infantrymen, most SF guys are probably between the ages of 20 and 45, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that like a game changer when you came out here and you're dealing with like me, like I slipped on the ice and my wrist hurts type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different clientele for sure. You have a bigger age range, you know, from kids really to the geriatric population. So there's an age range. I mean, a lot of things are different, and the documentation is different. Like, I've worked in a hospital setting. I've worked in private practice clinics, like, because I did bounce around because I wasn't loving it, and I learned I just wasn't loving it anywhere.
Right. So, I mean, that's a common thing, right? Like trying to find the place. It sounds like you were feeling kind of not at home where you were at career-wise. And how old are you at this point?
41.
Not then.
Oh, I thought you meant right now.
No.
I was like, why are you asking?
So you're not, I mean, you said that. I did not ask you. I said during that period, how old were you?
I was, probably 30.
Yeah, so like prime midlife crisis time, right? At least for veterans that get out, oftentimes it's like the 30s that is our midlife crisis. At least that's what we see in Mission 43 oftentimes. So what was the decision?
Well, I mean, I worked for a while, and then, I felt like I did have that like midlife crisis point, and I decided that I was gonna use my GI Bill, and I was going to become a pilot.
Oh, we've heard rumors of this. You took the pilot assessment test, and you were not conceited enough to actually fulfill that commitment, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm not doing it.
Oh, so I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So what happened? Are you a pilot?
So I got my private pilot's license.
What? Okay.
But I quit my job and started school. I went to another clinic and kind of worked part-time, very flexible place, so I could still be working a little bit. But I did that in January of 2020, and turns out
something happen?
Doing something that's life-changing in January 2020 wasn't a great idea.
Oh yeah, that thing. All right, so did your school shut down, or did you just get your private pilot's license and then... Because you're a doctor now that decided to be a pilot, so you sound like my sons right now. They're like, I'm going to be a doctor, an astronaut, an NFL player.
Yes, and they should.
They should.
Do
they
all
will.
of those things.
Okay.
The school closed for a while, and then you couldn't go on any training flights because you couldn't sit that close to someone. So you couldn't fly. So basically, I was at home a lot. Going crazy because I had just switched jobs, and now I didn't have a patient load, and there were no elective surgeries happening, and so there just weren't a lot of patients. The clinic had lesser hours. I didn't have school.
And you're married at this point too now, right?
And I'm married, and my husband works from home, and I'm at home.
Yep.
And we're just like
slowly descending into madness.
Yeah, maybe you could say that.
Oh, I mean, I'm just not that it happened to me, but that definitely happened to me.
Yeah, but that's actually how I got introduced to Mission 43, was during that time.
As a veteran, yeah, I remember the first event. I think the first event that you came to was a volunteer project that we did during COVID, because a lot of the organizations here locally, a lot of their volunteer base are retired people, right? And then once COVID hit, then those retired people didn't feel comfortable doing that. And we had a base of people that were cool throwing on a mask or doing whatever was necessary and going to volunteer. And it was the food bank, right? The Idaho Food Bank?
Yep.
So yeah. I saw you there. I remember that. And then what else did you get involved in?
So, yeah, once I did that, because found something I could do outside of my house, some volunteering, and then, being introduced to you. I don't remember who all was there, but I remember you, and I remember Chad.
Chad's unforgettable.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, this is like a group of people that I can can be around and get on board.
You must have
with.
met Chad then, not me. Yes.
Yeah, it was definitely
Chad. I understand. Yes.
Yeah. And so then kind of looking more into what Mission43 was doing and different volunteer opportunities that were happening at that time, and then came across the Leaders Fellowship. So applied for that and was in cohort 3, which I think honestly was like really, I mean, that was such a good experience for so many reasons. But I think that's what helped me to reflect on career and what I wanted, what I was missing. And just helped me to sort of figure out next steps.
I feel we've worked together for a couple of years now, and even though we bounce around it every now and then, I'm wondering, do you mind talking about your phase 2 experience, being the wilderness immersion experience? Because I happen to be the guide for your small group of 5? I think 5 people maybe that were fellows in the cohort, including you. You were the only woman in that. Do you mind talking about that and like what that experience was like for someone that's thinking maybe they want to throw their hat into that ring, or maybe it's a worthwhile experience, or maybe not?
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was a great experience, like the whole Leaders Fellowship. I think the phase 2 was an opportunity to get to know my group that I was put with, and which, however you guys select the groups, like I felt so lucky to be in the group that I was in, and those guys and their families are now they are my best friends, like in Idaho and beyond, because they're not even all here, and so feel really lucky, and so got to know them, and so we had one day of just going out kind of by ourselves,
like the solitude day.
Solitude day.
Yeah.
And I during that time just thought about a lot of things, and I was applying for jobs, and I was ready to move. Like I was going to leave Idaho.
I do not remember that. Podcast is over. I'm just kidding.
I'm not going to leave Idaho.
Good.
But just like searching for something else. And I remember, on that solitude day, just going out and thinking about, thinking about what am I doing? Where do I want to be? Where should I be? And I like felt this sort of overwhelming feeling of like, you're right where you're supposed to be. And I took that as like Idaho, with this group of people. Like, you might not be in a job that you want to be in right now or doing, but like it'll happen, and it'll happen here. So it was, and it's an experience. Like, I think that solitude is really important. I don't think people do that on their own, and it was sort of forced upon us, and a whole day to just be by yourself and think, like, that's kind of scary a little bit, but
in a pretty nice setting though, by the way. It's
beautiful setting.
Well, I remember you very well, and I feel like we got to know you and the rest of your small group, and you did have a remarkable small group, but you guys also have been remarkably close ever since. And not just the individual fellows, but the families of each of those fellows as well is now very intertwined. It's hard for me to even think back and remember who was actually in that small group and the other ones who's now their spouses or their kids or everyone else that's involved. It's a large ripple effect, but it was a really meaningful experience for me. I'm curious because you didn't work for CAF then. That wasn't, I don't even know if that was in the picture or not, at least from my perspective. I had no idea. But it wasn't long after that CAF Idaho became a real potential for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think doors just opened, and Jen, who was in my position before, and did awesome things to start CAF Idaho. She
also a fellow, cohort 2.
Also a fellow, yeah. So she took another role, and this position opened up. And I actually worked with Jen as a PT. She's also a PT. previously, and I had volunteered with CAF a little bit, but didn't really know at that time sort of the interactions that CAF and Mission 43 had together. And so, yeah, volunteered, and then the position opened up, and being now a part of Mission 43 and a volunteer with CAF and kind of seeing that cohesion, I was like, maybe that's the job. Like I can see myself in that position, and it has the parts and pieces that I think I need and want.
So you didn't just like tiptoe in. You took over as the director from Jen Skizik, who is absolutely fantastic before you, and you haven't skipped a beat. You've done everything as the leader of CAF Idaho now, like one of the biggest, most important initiatives for JCAF, right? Mission 43 is one of their initiatives, so CAF Idaho. What has it been like for you? Like, what is the highlights in this? Boy, has it been 2 years? 3 years?
Coming on 2 years, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think at first it's overwhelming, right? Like, it felt like a big role and big shoes to fill, to come in. And I think, like, being part of the fellowship, too, and kind of knowing a little bit about JCAF and a little bit about, like, CAF and Mission 43, it just felt like I felt like I had this social responsibility to now do something and, like, give back. And it's been an adjustment leaving the PT world,
Sure.
Deciding not to pursue my pilot midlife crisis career move. I mean, I suppose I could still go down that road, but
Please don't.
No. So yeah, but it's, beyond like that adjustment and figuring things out. I think it's been such an awesome change, and like feels to me like a good fit. And I feel like, meeting all the people that we get to work with and provide grants for, and host different camps and clinics and things like that. And it's just, I mean, that's the highlight, is the people and being able to give back and be a part of that community.
I mean, you've built an amazing team around you too. Like, everything is very lean. I don't know if people actually know how small CAF Idaho is. I mean, you got you, Bailey, Wilson, April. And that's about it as far as full-time people that are making this happen for a lot of adaptive athletes in the entire state and their families. I'm curious, like, because now we work together under the umbrella of the Idaho Outdoor Field House, and we share that space. It's both of our organizational homes. But why is it a good fit? Like, why is Mission 43 and CAF Idaho, like, why do we, I mean, not you and I, obviously, we yell at each other on a daily basis, but in general, I know, join the club and get in line. But why are the organizations, I don't know, why do they have the synergy that they had? And yes, I said synergy.
Synergy, that's a good word. I mean, I think a little bit because of some of those things I mentioned before, like I think we both feel like, I guess I can't speak for you, but I think our organizations, like, we're doing something bigger than ourselves. And
yes, you can speak for me.
We find our work important, and it's service, that we have that service mindset, and we get to do that every day. And I think our organizations work well together and overlap because of those things, because a lot of the people that are, everyone I've met that's a part of Mission 43, a Mission 43 member, has that service-minded attitude, wants to, support their community. They want to be a part of something bigger. And I think CAF fits in there because we also, I mean, we are a big organization, a lean organization that needs a lot of people to come in and support us. We can't do it. I mean, we do an awesome job. our team is awesome, our team of 4, but we can't do it on our own.
Yeah.
And we just have Mission43 volunteers to show up and pack a trailer for us in like 5 minutes.
We are good at that. Manual labor is really our forte.
I mean, but everything, you know, I've had Dawn Hunter, another Leaders Fellow, just go to the grocery store and buy all of the things we needed for a clinic, you know, like people just step up, and that's what Mission43 members do. And we need that.
Well, Heather, I absolutely love working with you, and
Same.
I hope that anyone listening, adaptive athlete, military or not, certainly not a requirement to be an adaptive athlete in the CAF Idaho umbrella. If you're an Idaho person, you're interested in any of the grants, resources, camps, clinics, any of the stuff that you guys are putting on, which is always incredible, to reach out to you and your team at CAF Idaho. And I'm just really thankful for everything you've done, both for our country and for our community, and for me personally. Honestly, Heather, you're an amazing person, and we're damn lucky to have you around.
I feel the same way about you, Dan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Payment under the table. Thanks, Heather. Thanks for joining us for the Mission43 podcast. We hope you found it informative and helpful. If you have any questions or feedback, please comment below or email podcast@mission43.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date with new episodes. Be proud of your service, not defined by it. See you next time.